The hallway light cast long, silent shadows against the wall as I stood outside his door. It was just past midnight and the house felt off. Too quiet. Not the usual peaceful kind of quiet. This was something else. Hollow. Unsettled. Like the walls were holding their breath. Devon had come home earlier that day, the second of 3 outpatient treatments for the flu that had left him pale, achy, and oddly compliant. 19 years old and usually bursting with stubborn energy. He now moved like someone 3 times his age. The doctors assured us it was nothing serious, but the medications they sent him home with were a different kind of cruel. Potent enough to knock him out completely. He hadn't said much all evening, just retreated into his room, curled up under the covers and disappeared. I pushed his door open slowly, careful not to let it creak too loud, though I knew by now it wouldn't matter. He was gone to the world, sedated so deeply that even his own body seemed unsure if it still belonged to him. He lay on his side, one leg slightly bent, an arm tucked beneath his pillow. The blanket had slipped down to his waist. His skin looked soft in the dim light, flushed in places, pale in others. There was a faint sheen of sweat across his neck, and the shallow rhythm of his breath rose and fell in such a perfect, dreamless pattern that it almost scared me. I stepped inside without thinking. The carpet under my bare feet felt unusually warm, like it had absorbed his heat, like his presence had lingered in ways his consciousness couldn't. I stood there looking down at him and felt something shift in my chest. Not affection, not concern. Something weightless, shapeless, but heavy with possibility. Should have ended there. I should have turned around, walked out, closed the door and gone to bed. But I didn't. I stayed. Staring. Watching. Noticing the way his eyelashes brushed his cheeks, how relaxed his hands were, and the slight movement of his ribcage with each breath. The room had an energy to it. Not sexual. Not maternal. But charged. Like something was waiting to happen. He was here. Right in front of me. But unreachable. And I realized I wasn't just checking on him anymore. I was remembering something I thought I'd buried. And that's when it started. Eugene, my husband, was out of town for the weekend, visiting his mother at a long-term care facility just outside New York. She'd taken a fall the week before, nothing life-threatening, but enough to draw him back to his hometown, to that cold, gray building that smelled of antiseptic and wilted carnations. He was 47, too practical to worry and too dutiful to stay. He called earlier to say he'd arrived safely, then faded from my mind like a forgotten coat in the back of a closet. The house had never felt so silent. Devon's room was 2 doors down, and yet it felt like another world, one I hadn't been invited into but kept circling like a restless ghost. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, still holding on to the tension from moments earlier. His body, limp and drugged, still haunted me. That slow, rhythmic breathing. The openness of it. The helplessness. And not in a grotesque way, not in the kind that demanded shame, but in a way that mirrored something I had buried in myself for too long. It came rushing back with frightening clarity. The old drawer beneath the bed. The velvet pouch. The stainless steel cuffs with their perfect cold bite. The nylon rope. The melted candles and rituals of stillness. I hadn't used them in almost a year. The first time had been accidental. A curiosity born from exhaustion. The act of restraint, arms behind my back, ankles bound, wasn't about submission or pleasure. Not then. It was about surrendering control without asking anyone for permission. It was about silence and stillness and imagining what it would feel like to be caught and cared for. That was the part no one would understand. But tonight felt different. Not like the others. Tonight, the idea took shape in the dark with the kind of gravity you don't argue with. He wouldn't wake up. Not like that. Not under the fog of medication, flu, and exhaustion. He was 19, old enough to live on his own, but young enough to still sleep through thunderstorms. And now, sedated like a stone in a river. The thought slithered in. What if I did it in his room? Not with him. Not even near him. Just in the presence of that sleeping quiet. That unreachable stillness. Not for him to see but for me to feel. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about him. It was about danger, shame, the fragile power of choosing to be powerless. I went to the closet, retrieved the pouch. The metal still held the chill of the last time I used them. I grabbed a pair of old nylons, fashioned a loop, froze the key inside a block of ice, and stared at the strange, elegant cruelty of my own design. He wouldn't know. He'd never know. But I would. And that was enough. The house had long since surrendered to silence. No traffic hummed outside. No pipes shifted. Just the soft ticking of the thermostat on the far wall and the dull throb in my own ears, like the silence itself had taken on a pulse. I stood outside his door again, the second time that night, this time not with concern but with intent. The pouch weighed strangely in my hand, not heavy but significant. I opened the door slowly. Darkness spilled out warm and thick. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't need to. The glow from the hallway pooled just enough for me to see him, the outline of his body sunken into the mattress, limbs tangled in his sheets like he'd fallen mid-thought and never finished dreaming. The room smelled faintly of aftershave and clean laundry. There was a subtle, almost chemical trace of the hospital still clinging to the air, sterile and distant. But underneath it something else. Something boyish. Lived in. Too intimate. He hadn't moved since earlier. His breathing remained slow, methodical, a metronome in the quiet. His chest rose and fell without urgency as time had forgotten him. The blankets were twisted around his waist, exposing the slope of his back. One arm hung limply over the edge of the bed, fingers slack. I knelt, careful to move without sound as if even the carpet might betray me. I reached up and tied the nylon loop to the base of his ceiling light, letting the ice hang like a slow, ticking secret above me. The key, sealed inside, swayed gently with the tension of the fabric. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The way it shimmered in the dark felt almost ceremonial. Then I lay down on the floor. The cuffs clicked into place, one by one, wrists behind me, ankles drawn together. The chill of the metal bit into my skin and my breathing shallowed, instinctively. This wasn't about arousal. Not yet. It was about gravity. The full weight of my choices settled over me like a second body. I felt it in my limbs, in my spine, in the stretch of every tightened muscle. Every inch of me was suddenly hyper-aware. Of the silence of the sleeping boy above me, of the wet heat gathering behind my eyes. Bound like that, helpless, hidden, half-exposed beneath a hanging key. I didn't feel powerful. I felt cracked open. Not erotic. Not brave. Just raw. The nylon thread above me glistened as the ice slowly began to melt. A faint drip echoed into the silence, steady and indifferent. And as I lay there, cuffed on the floor of my stepson's room, the shame didn't come in waves. Just existed, ever-present, right beside the thrill. And neither one asked permission to stay. Time became a slow, aching thing. Not a rhythm I could measure, but a presence that sat heavily on my chest. Every second felt like it stretched its arms too wide, dragging minutes into hours, minutes into something endless. The weight of my body in that position, wrists wrenched behind my back, ankles drawn in tight, began to register. My muscles throbbed in dull protest. My skin pressed too long against the carpet, tingling with pins and needles and something far more sinister. Anticipation. The key above me hung like a countdown. Droplets of ice water began to fall, rhythmically, indifferently. Each one struck the floor with a sound louder than it should have been. My heartbeat tried to match it but failed. It thudded against my ribs in frantic, uneven bursts. I closed my eyes, but it only made the darkness thicker, more intimate. And in that dark, my mind betrayed me. I imagined it. His eyes flickering open, a groggy shift in the bed. The weight of his gaze fell on me like a spotlight. The gasp. The silence that would follow. Would he freeze? Would he call out? Would he understand? I didn't want him to touch me. I didn't want anything physical. I just wanted to be seen. To be real. To exist in that suspended moment of discovery. where shame and truth collided and no one could unsee what had been exposed. The fantasy wasn't erotic. It was emotional, desperate. A cry I didn't know I'd swallowed years ago. In that imagined moment, I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just the wife, the stepmother, the woman who made things run smoothly and stayed quiet when everyone else forgot to ask how she was doing. It was undeniable. Spectacle. A wound split open in a quiet room. My breath hitched. My body trembled, not from pleasure, not even from pain, but from something colder, deeper. A fracture inside me widened. And then I whispered his name, barely a breath between clenched teeth. He shifted. Quiet, unconscious twitch. His fingers curled slightly on the mattress. His body moved, just enough to make my lungs seize in terror and want. But he didn't wake. And that almost hurt more. The tears came without warning. They didn't build. They fell. Hot, bitter, unsummoned. My throat tightened, my cheeks wet. Felt pathetic. Exposed not in fantasy but in truth. What was I doing? Who was I now? The shame wasn't sudden. It had been waiting, watching. It moved in beside me and didn't flinch when I broke. It stayed like it belonged. I lay there, crying into the silence, the cuffs biting into my wrists, the ice dripping above me like a slow, deliberate confession. And I knew, even before the key fell, that I'd crossed a line I couldn't return from. The sound of the key hitting the floor was softer than I expected, a dull, metallic clink that echoed louder inside my chest than it did in the room. It didn't feel like salvation. Felt like a verdict. I lay still for a few seconds longer, my body frozen in tension, unsure if I was ready to move. My wrists throbbed from the pressure of the cuffs, the skin warm and raw. My shoulders ached. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Everything inside me was trembling, not from fear anymore, but from a kind of shame so thick it made the air feel weighted. I rolled slightly, enough to reach the key. My fingers struggled, numb, shaky. It took longer than it should have to line it up with the lock. The click of metal giving way was a strange sound. Intimate, final. One cuff opened, then the next. My ankles followed. Each release brought a pang of relief that was quickly swallowed by something else. Something emptier. I didn't look at him. Couldn't. His breathing hadn't changed. He hadn't moved again. But the air between us felt different now. Heavy with all the things he didn't know. And all the things I couldn't take back. I pushed myself off the floor with trembling arms, the carpet fibers imprinting into my skin like quiet accusations. My legs shook as I stood. I gathered the cuffs and the nylon and clutched them against my chest as though they might still make sense if I held them close enough. They didn't. The hallway felt colder than before. Harsher. The silence now felt less like a secret and more like a sentence. In the bathroom the light was too bright. It flickered slightly overhead, humming low and constant. I placed the cuffs on the counter like relics and looked up. The woman in the mirror didn't look like someone I knew. Her eyes were red and puffy, rimmed in shadows. Her hair stuck to the sides of her face in damp strands. Her lips were dry, parted slightly, like she was trying to say something but couldn't remember how. Her wrists bore angry red bands where the cuffs had clung too tight. Small bruises were already forming. She looked tired, hollow, exposed in a way that had nothing to do with skin. I turned on the faucet, let the water run too hot, and splashed my face. The heat stung. My cheeks went pink. The water dripped from my chin, but nothing felt cleaner. I grabbed a towel, dried off the evidence. But my reflection stayed the same. Whatever part of me had led me to that room, to that moment, hadn't left with the restraints. It had stayed. And now it was staring back at me. The morning light crawled across the kitchen like it was searching for something. Soft at first, pale and golden, it lit up the counter where steam curled from the coffee pot and fogged the window above the sink. Everything looked normal, familiar. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I moved through the space like I belonged to it, but something inside me had gone quiet. Not peaceful, hollow. Like the house and I had made a pact not to speak of the night before. The scent of coffee helped. So did the sound. That low, bubbling drip that used to comfort me before I started waking up in pieces. I poured a mug and held it too tight, the heat pressing into my palms, grounding me. Then I heard him. The soft shuffle of bare feet. Slow drag on the stairs. A yawn he didn't bother to hide. He walked in with the kind of heaviness that comes from sleep that never really arrived. His hair was a mess. Eyes are slightly red at the corners. His t-shirt clung to his frame like it had twisted with him through the night. He looked off, not sick but unsettled. A version of himself I hadn't seen before. He blinked at the light, rubbed the side of his neck and muttered, "Tossed and turned all night." Then came the second blow. Quiet, almost to himself. Didn't get a wink of sleep. My heart stopped, just for a second. Enough to register the chill that followed it. Enough to feel something seize behind my ribs like a slow-moving bruise. I didn't speak. Couldn't. I nodded like it meant nothing and turned my face away so he wouldn't see what I didn't know how to hide. He accepted the coffee I handed him with one hand, still avoiding my eyes. He stood in the same kitchen I'd spent the last hour trying to forget myself in, and now he was part of it again, unchanged in appearance but altered in presence. Something about him felt heavier, quieter. We didn't speak after that, but we both knew something had shifted. I pretended to fuss with the spoon in my cup. He leaned against the counter, sipping in silence, his gaze somewhere far off. But I felt it, the edge in the air, the fragile quiet between two people who would never revisit the same version of the past. He walked away eventually, slowly, like sleep still clung to him or maybe something else did. And I stood there, still holding a mug I hadn't tasted, with the weight of a secret I couldn't unthink. Some things once imagined don't go back in the box. They sit with you, even in the silence. What would you do if the person you thought was unconscious told you they never slept at all? Would you confront it or pretend it never happened? Let me know in the comments below. Because some secrets don't stay buried forever. And if this story made you feel something, conflicted, curious, unsettled, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell. More stories are waiting in the silence. And you won't want to miss them.